Hello and welcome to another SonicLAB. Today's the day we take a look at the brand new Korg Volca FM. Here it is, very much in the same mould as the other Volcas, same form factor, same little keyboard, same everything. But this little guy got you all very excited when it was first previewed at NAMM. We spoke to the maker, Tatsuya, who was very proud of it. And what's interesting about this is it's a full 6-operator FM synthesis engine. It's basically a DX7, but with 3 voices. And that is cramming a lot into this little box. So as we know, FM is a synthesis method that is quite impenetrable, frankly. It's not the sort of thing that's very easy to use. Lots of parameters, lots of unfamiliar terms, operators and what have you. All of the 6 operators are effectively sine waves that intermodulate with each other and are stacked in different forms. This has got a full 32 algorithms, a full 6 operators, and basically has exactly the same internal structure as a DX7. Now, DX7, for those of you who perhaps are not as old as me, this was a sort of wonder instrument, one of the first hybrid sort of digital instruments that came along. Gosh, it must have been 1980, 1984, and it really kind of heralded the beginning of presets. Because it was so darn difficult to program, people used to make presets and sell them, and you buy cartridges and all that sort of thing. The great thing about this little fella is it also reads DX7 system exclusive banks. So you can, if there are tons of these online, and you can dump them straight into this, and that means you get access to all of those voices. What does FM sound like? Well, let me play you through a few of the presets that come with it and you'll get an idea of what we're talking about. So before we start, quick explanation of the front panel and the memory locations. As with all the Volcas, you've got a 16-step sequencer and this little keyboard here, I guess is a couple of octaves, and this gives you all the function switches. Pressing this button allows you to switch on and off all the various parameters inside. There's also the ability to recall 16 memory slots. Pressing the memory button and then just recalling which one you want will load the sound associated and the sequence. But there are 32 sound locations in the Volca FM, which you select with this black knob here. So this is the first pattern, that sort of classic wiry sort of sound. Let's load another one. Again, FM's quite well known for sort of its bell and ticky sounds. But it also does kind of quite nice muted stuff. And sort of clarinet. It was very, was favoured by a lot of keyboard players because it emulated keyboards quite well. Remember for the time, brass, that organ, more basses. But what I'll do, if I just go back to this sound, well, let's actually listen to Music Box. You can see that the motion sequences is in place here, and it's adjusting the parameters, you can see, because they're flashing. So if we now just go into program mode, and I've got MIDI keyboard coming in here, which is actually the mini log, and I'm playing the sounds from this keyboard. Oh look, there's the electric piano. This is the classic DX sound. This is where the velocity fader comes in, and you can hear the amount of timbral change that happens when you hit velocity. But, and this I think is kind of the Achilles heel of this Volca FM, I've hooked this up via MIDI to the Korg mini log, the keyboard which does transmit velocity. But as I hit this keyboard, it is not affecting the velocity of the FM. I have to use the fader. And this is where there's something a bit odd going on, because basically, if you look at the MIDI chart, which is a little bit cryptic, as is a lot of MIDI charts, it doesn't respond to velocity with note on. So you can send velocity as a separate value or as a controller value via a controller keyboard, but not via the keys. So you're kind of like killing quite a lot of the power of FM, because the thing about FM that made it so popular in the first place was the sort of expressivity through velocity, because the FM synthesis algorithm allows you to kind of create an awful lot of additional dynamics. So if we go through some of these other programs, you can hear that me moving the fader here is changing the sound quite radically, particularly these sort of bass type sounds. So effectively you cannot play it via velocity. There may be some clever way of mapping velocity to the control it needs, but it's not tied to note on, so it's not quite going to respond in the same way. Xylophones. You get the picture. These are sort of classic. They're more like your preset FM sounds. FM is a very complex synthesis method, and bear in mind you've got essentially six oscillators with this that all interact in a very non-standard way. This is not subtractive synthesis. It's its own kind of synthesizer. And you can access all of the parameters should you choose. You press the edit button, then go through all the individual rather cryptically titled parameters, and you change operators up to 6, and then these are the global parameters. It does come with a parameter card on the back side, or whichever way you want to look around it. These are all the different algorithms that you've got, which are effectively the configurations of all the operators. There are 32 in total, and also you've got this kind of parameter chart which lets you know exactly what's going on, much in the style of the original DX. Should also mention that all of these parameters are addressable by a system exclusive. Now that got me really excited, because I thought, well, actually I could hook up an existing DX7 editor, because as far as I can tell they do look like they're mapped the same way, but there must be some slight difference, because hooking up an editor to this to try and change these parameters, which would make the editing of the FM voice much more intuitive, unfortunately didn't work, which is a shame. There may be some string that needs to be manipulated, and I tried iPad editors, I tried editors on OS X, and just none of them do. But you can, as I say, fire system exclusive dumps, whole banks of sounds into the Volca FM. The other thing that's a slight issue with this, obviously FM being complicated as it is, you might tinker with a sound, but there's no way of getting them out of the Volca. You can store them in, but you can't get them out because there's only a MIDI input port. However, as with a lot of Volcas, using the sync output, you can use that to send out sort of audio format data, and you can do this for the voices. So here I can decide to send the current program, all programs, the current sequence, or all sequence, or clone. And clone allows you to hook up 2 Volca FMs and have the current voice and setup data going into 2 FMs, so you can get 6 voices. Obviously this is audio format, you need to record this at 16-bit 44.1, but then you could have a backup in your DAW and load it back in to the Volca FM. So that some bright spark may come up with a way of doing this so that it works with an iPad app or whatever, and just reads the audio or feeds the audio in to access individual parameters, but nothing that I could find just yet. So we should get onto what happens on the front panel. I've got this little kind of bass sequence here, which actually I'm using a number of things. So first of all, I'm using a very, very slow tempo, which is actually coming from the Korg sync in from the mini log, which is running over here. So I'm running this sequence over here. So effectively what I'm able to do is create a very long pattern, but the reason I'm getting those 16th notes is because I've got the arpeggiator on, which is just repeating bum 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 bum. So even though each step, so I've got a very long sequence, but let's just listen to what I can do to the sound with the front panel. So remember, all of these parameters are controllable, so affecting the decay of the modulator. Really radically changes the sound, as does changing the algorithm, and I can make the sound longer, bring in a bit of LFO. I could even automate the beat division of the arpeggiator. So remember, all of this is recordable into the motion sequencer, so I can actually create some really massive amounts of movement and tonal variation inside the Volca FM just by playing it into a pattern. So you can get some really nice sounds. I mean, I think where for me the Volca FM really kind of lives, I don't care so much for the bell sounds, is these sort of pure sine wave sounds with really smacking front ends, and then these sort of interesting tonal variations by changing algorithms and the decay of the modulator. So as you did here in that pattern, there is an arpeggiator. You access this by pressing Function and key 5 to switch it on and off, but you can also enable it and disable it after the fact with the arpeggiator type knob. This takes you through these various different patterns. Which have, you know, plenty of patterns really, but then also you can change the beat division. So 1 for 1, or you go 2 to 3, right up to these really sort of high speed ones, or indeed the other way where you go 3 for 2, 2 for 1, so you can slow down the rate of arpeggiation as well. And remember, these parameters are also automatable, so you can create quite a lot of movement in that as well. Incidentally, it's worth mentioning that the tempo is divisible as well, so you can have 1 for 1 tempo, 1 for 2, or 1 for 4. That essentially lengthens the amount of time or the resolution of the sequencer. So you have 16 steps over a bar, 16 steps over 2 bars, 16 steps over 4 bars effectively, but of course that affects the resolution, so you can't play kind of faster. You might use that in conjunction with the arpeggiator to get the resolution in between those steps like I did in that original pattern. The other feature that this has is it's got a little chorus in it as well. It's not editable, but so if I take this kind of marimba sound and maybe tweak the sound a bit, this affects the modulator and this affects the carrier. Now if I switch the chorus on, which is Function Chorus, classic 80s keyboard chorus sound. You can't edit this, it's just on or off. You can also change modes. So we're in poly mode. If I go to mono mode, obviously just mono. This is the function button I'm pressing, and then unison, which gives us a bit more weight in the bottom end. Just isn't unison on. There's no, you can't edit the amount of detune or anything, but it sounds like there's a little bit of detune. Turn the chorus on as well. You know, you can start to build a slightly fatter sound by bringing those voices all together. Another thing that's pretty cool is you can chain patterns. Not in the traditional sense, perhaps. So if we now just load up sound 1, to chain patterns, I press the memory button and I hit arrange. So now it should go between these 3 patterns. And it will just cycle between them. This is sequence number 3, then it goes back to the beginning. So you can create longer patterns. You can't say, I want 3 of pattern 1, 1 of pattern 2, and then on the turnaround, you'd have to kind of program them all in individually and then extend the range. Because what you can do, obviously, is if you press the memory button, I could have all 16 patterns playing in a sequence, or I could just go these ones, or do you see what I mean? So you can create ranges of pattern chains. So better than not, but a slightly unusual way of implementing it, but it does give you access to much longer sequences if you were going to be using this as the source of your sequence. Another thing that's worth mentioning is that this guy is actually 3-note polyphonic. So you can play up to 3 notes, or you can have it in mono and unison. Additionally, there is another active step function, which is called warp active step. So if I now play the sequence, and I go into active step mode, I can switch on as usual the active steps, like with all the Volca sequences, so you can create some quite interesting variations sort of on the fly. This feature here, which is called warp active step, if I press that, now I hit warp active step, go back into active step mode, switch them all on, plays as normal, but now I switch a few off. What warp active step does is attempt to play all of those steps within the measure of a 16. So if I turn a load off, it plays the steps that are active within a measure. So it's a bit of a, it's a bit hit or miss, but it does allow you to create some interesting polyrhythmic possibilities by sort of stretching the steps that are active into the space of a full bar. So things can get a little more exciting. I've hooked up a DX7 editor here. This is called DexEd. It's a free download, and it's actually, probably can't hear it there, but it's an emulator of the DX7 voice in total. It also transmits individual parameters from every single parameter on the screen. So if the Volca FM could recognise it, it would be awesome, but for some reason it doesn't seem to want to. But what I can do in this particular one is go to, it comes with a whole bunch of preset banks. I can actually select a sound in here and then send that program to the DX7. So if I just go to the screen here, I'm going to hit send, and now that's in there. So that means now I have this sound. It's actually quite a nice sound. Got a lot of movement in it. And that's just in the edit buffer. That's not actually been stored, so I could save that to the memory, I could move it around. It's quite an interesting idea, but they've also got another program here, SysX Librarian, which is a basic playback and record of SysX. It's a SysX Librarian from S-Noise. So I could take a bank and I can just play it into the Volca FM, and now I have a whole new bank of sounds in there. This is actually pretty awesome because it means I've got access. These are just banks that I've downloaded for free off the internet. I mean, there are tons of them everywhere. The thing that is disappointing, and this is something that got me exciting, was that I thought that the editor, because it looks like the SysX is compatible, could talk to the Volca FM directly, then we could edit sounds precisely. I suppose the thing that you could do is, using the DexEd editor, I could create a sound in here, listening to it over the computer audio, and then just save that voice and transmit it. So it's so close to being a kind of really easy way into editing your FM voices. It just doesn't quite work as I'd expected. But overall, I mean, the access to all of these sounds is absolutely fantastic, and there are literally thousands, if not tens of thousands of them. So Volca FM, a lot of people very excited by it. 3-voice FM synth with a ton of all of those extra sounds available, and it sounds weighty, you know, the sparkles and the lows. It's got all of that FM goodness. The only thing that I think is a bit of a letdown is the fact that it doesn't respond to velocity over MIDI, and that on MIDI note on, and that really does kind of hamstring, I think, the creative potential of the FM sound. But once again, you know, the Volcas are really affordable. Prices will scroll below. They're usually around about 120 quid. Other currencies will show. So if you like the Volca way of working and you want to get into that FM world, then it's a bit of a no-brainer, really. I mean, I think it's especially cheeky that they've managed to load Yamaha's SysX sounds when, in fact, Yamaha themselves chose not to via the reface. But that's just one of those little kind of industry inside things that makes somebody like me chuckle. So that's the Volca FM. Once again, great way of getting into the FM world and within the kind of Volca workflow, which a lot of people really like. These kind of cheap to buy single purpose modules are something that Korg does extremely well. Anyway, that's it. Thanks very much for watching. Stay tuned. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye now.